Welcome to this special audiobook, The Ghost in the Guestbook by Amjad. This is a spooky mystery told in very simple and easy English. If you can understand this story from start to finish, then guess what? Your English is already pretty good. And if you stay with me till the end, your listening and comprehension skills will improve even more. This isn't just a story. It's learning English through fun and suspense. Now sit back, relax, maybe grab a cup of tea or coffee, and let's begin The Ghost in the Guestbook. Once upon a time in a quiet town in Oregon, there was a young couple, Emily and Jake Turner. Emily was a kind, smart woman who worked as a school teacher. Jake, her husband, was charming and worked in real estate. Everyone thought they were a perfect couple. One day, Emily received a letter. It was from a lawyer. Her late parents, who died many years ago in a car crash, had left her something, a small, peaceful lake house deep in the woods. Emily was surprised. She didn't even know they owned a lake house. Jake was very excited. A house in the woods? Sounds romantic, he said. They decided to visit the place, clean it, and maybe turn it into a weekend home. When they arrived, the house was old but beautiful. There were tall trees, a calm lake nearby, and fresh air all around. Inside the house, there was old furniture, dusty books, and pictures on the wall. Felt like time had stopped there. But there was one thing that caught Emily's attention. A brown leather guestbook sitting on a table by the fireplace. She opened it. The pages were filled with sweet messages from people who had stayed there. But one name kept showing up again and again. The Happy Millers, signed every year, on the same date, June 14th. That name gave her a strange feeling. Her maiden name, before she got married, was also Miller. And June 14th? That was her parents' wedding anniversary. And just like that, the mystery began. Emily sat down on the old couch with the guestbook in her hands. The brown leather cover felt smooth, but cold. She turned the pages slowly, reading each message. Year after year, someone had written in the book. The same names were always there. June 14th, 2001. A beautiful stay. The lake is peaceful as always. The Happy Millers. June 14th, 2002. Another perfect anniversary. This house is full of love. The Happy Millers. June 14th, 2003. Still our favorite place. Thank you for keeping it safe. The Happy Millers. Emily's heart beat faster. The dates continued every year. Always June 14th. Always signed by the Happy Millers. She whispered to herself, "That's my mom and dad's wedding date. And Miller is my old name." Emily felt confused. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was only 19. She thought she knew everything about them. But they never told her about this lake house. She showed the guestbook to Jake. He looked at the pages and smiled. Maybe it was just a family tradition. Or maybe someone else with the same last name used to come here. But Emily didn't agree. The handwriting looked very familiar. It looked like her father's writing. She remembered it from old birthday cards he had written to her. The tall letters, the soft curve of each word. It was almost exactly the same. She turned to the last page. The most recent message was from the year before. It said, June 14th, 2024. We'll finally meet you next year. The Happy Millers. Emily stared at the message. The words made her feel cold inside. It didn't say, "We hope to see you," or "maybe next year." It said, "We'll finally meet you next year." Who were they planning to meet? Emily was the only one alive now. Her parents were gone. There were no other Millers in her family. She had no brothers, no sisters, no cousins close to her. Just her and Jake. She looked at the handwriting again. The message was written by someone who knew how her father wrote. Or, it was written by someone who was her father. But that made no sense. Her father was dead. Her mother too. Jake laughed softly and closed the book. Maybe someone is playing a joke. Emily didn't laugh. She was silent. Something didn't feel right. This house wasn't just a gift from her parents. It was more than that. Why did her parents keep coming here? Why didn't they ever tell her about this place? And why would the message say they would meet her next year? She stood up and walked to the window. The lake outside was still. No sound. No wind. No birds. It was too quiet. Emily had a strange thought. What if her parents had not died by accident? What if something else had happened? Jake put his arm around her. Let's not worry about old messages. This house is ours now. Let's fix it up, enjoy the lake, and leave the past behind. Emily nodded slowly, but deep inside, she couldn't stop thinking. Next year. We'll finally meet you next year. Those words stayed in her mind, and she felt something new. Not just sadness, but fear. Emily could not stop thinking about the message in the guest book. That night, as she lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling. The words kept coming back to her mind. We'll finally meet you next year. She turned to look at Jake. He was sleeping peacefully beside her. But she couldn't sleep. Something about the house felt wrong. It was not just old. It felt like it was hiding something. The next morning, Emily woke up early. She made some coffee and sat outside for a while, looking at the lake. The water was still and quiet, like a mirror. She thought about her parents. She tried to remember if they had ever said anything about a cabin, a lake, or a vacation spot, but nothing came to her mind. After breakfast, Emily decided to clean up more of the house. She went through old drawers, cupboards, and closets. She found old clothes, tools, photo frames, and even some old dishes, but nothing personal. No family pictures. No letters. In the living room, behind a large bookshelf, she noticed a small door. It was half hidden. She had not seen it before. She called out to Jake. "Hey, come here." There's a door behind the shelf. Jake walked over, curious. A secret door? That's interesting. He helped her move the heavy shelf. Behind it was a wooden door with a rusty handle. When Emily pulled it open, a cold smell came from inside. It was damp and musty, like wet earth and old wood. There was a staircase going down. It was dark. Jake turned on the flashlight on his phone. Let's check it out. Emily followed him slowly. The basement was large and quiet. The floor was made of stone, and the walls were bare wood. There were boxes and old furniture covered with cloth. Dust floated in the air. They looked around. Most of the boxes were empty or full of old, useless things. Books, blankets, broken lamps. But in the corner of the basement, there was a small metal cabinet with a lock on it. Jake pulled on the handle. It's locked. Emily looked around and found a bunch of keys hanging from a nail on the wall. She tried a few and finally one of them worked. Inside the cabinet were files. Many old papers. Most were boring property papers, water bills, tax forms. But then Emily found something strange. There were photos. Black and white photos of the house from many years ago. Some of the pictures had her parents in them. She was shocked. There was her father standing near the lake, holding hands with her mother. They looked young, happy. There were also pages from a journal. They were written in her mother's handwriting. Emily read one out loud. June 15th, 2010. We stayed hidden in the woods again. He doesn't know we're watching. He seems perfect when she's around, but we don't trust him. Something feels wrong. We need to know more before she says yes. Emily's hands shook as she turned the pages. Another page said, June 14th, 2011. We've seen enough. We can't let him marry her. But how do we tell her? Will she believe us? He acts so loving. But there is darkness in him. We know what he did. Emily stepped back, holding the papers tight in her hand. Her heart beat fast. She looked at Jake, but he was still looking through other boxes. Her parents had been coming here secretly. They were writing about Jake, about how they didn't trust him, about how they were trying to watch him. She whispered to herself, why would they write this? What did Jake do? She thought about the car accident. Her parents died when Jake was just her new boyfriend. She had always thought it was just bad luck. But now it didn't feel like bad luck. She looked at the next journal page. June 14th, 2012. If something happens to us, it won't be an accident. She must find this place. She must know the truth. Emily's legs felt weak. She sat down on a wooden box, holding the journal close to her chest. Suddenly, Jake called from across the room. Emily, I think I found something under this floorboard. Emily looked up. He was kneeling near a loose wooden plank on the floor. She stood up slowly. Her mind was full of questions. What was under the floor? What did her parents find out? And more importantly, who really was Jake. Jake tapped on the wooden plank with his fingers. It made a hollow sound. Something was definitely underneath. The wood was old and slightly loose. He pulled out a small tool from one of the boxes and carefully pried the board open. Emily stood a few feet away, holding the journal. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were fixed on Jake, but her mind was still stuck on the words she had just read. If something happens to us, it won't be an accident. Jake pulled the board up completely, and there was a small space below. Inside it, wrapped in plastic and tied with string, was a metal box. It was old and covered in dust. Jake lifted it out and placed it on the floor. "Looks like a time capsule or something," he said. Emily slowly walked over. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears. She watched as Jake untied the string and opened the lid. Inside were old cassette tapes, photographs, and a few more papers. Jake picked up one of the tapes. It had a sticker on it. In black ink, someone had written, "Play this if we're gone." Emily reached out quickly and grabbed it before Jake could say anything else. She stared at the tape, feeling like it was a message meant only for her. She didn't say anything to Jake yet. She quietly slipped the tape into her pocket. Jake didn't notice. He was already flipping through the photos. "Look at this. Your parents at the lake. They really used to come here often." Emily nodded slowly. She pretended to be calm, but her stomach felt tight. Her mind was racing. Why had her parents hidden all of this? Why had they left a message for her in case they were gone? She looked at Jake again. He smiled at her like everything was normal. But now, something inside Emily had changed. She didn't feel safe anymore. She felt like there was a wall between them now. A wall built with secrets, lies, and a strange kind of silence. Later that afternoon, Jake said he would go to town to buy tools and cleaning supplies. As soon as he left, Emily ran upstairs and searched through the boxes in the attic. After a few minutes, she found an old tape recorder. It still worked. She sat on the floor, placed the cassette inside, and pressed play. At first, there was only static. Then her mother's voice came through. Soft, but serious. "If you're hearing this, it means we didn't make it." Emily gasped and put her hand over her mouth. Her mother continued, "Emily, we didn't die in an accident. We were going to tell you the truth, but we waited too long. We didn't trust him. Jake. We followed him, watched him, and what we found scared us." Her father's voice joined in. "He wasn't the man he pretended to be. We believe he hurt someone before he met you. A girl who disappeared in his college town. He was never caught, but the clues pointed to him. When you brought him home, we knew we had to do something." Her mother again. "We came here every year to watch him from a distance. We bought this house with hidden savings. We hoped you'd never need to come here. But if you are here now, then we failed." Her father ended the message, "Emily, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is." Don't let him hurt you too. The tape stopped. Emily sat frozen. The recorder still made a soft buzzing sound, but the message was over. She felt sick. Her hands were cold. Her parents had been spying on Jake for years. They believed he was dangerous. And now, after all this time, she had found their message. She tried to think back. Had she ever seen signs? Had Jake ever acted in a strange or cruel way? She thought about small things. Times when Jake got angry quickly. Moments when he asked too many questions. Times when he didn't like her talking to old friends. Were those signs? She didn't know. But now, she couldn't ignore what she had heard. Her parents had warned her. Her father's voice was still in her ears. Don't let him hurt you too. She had to be careful now. She had to act normal. Pretend everything was fine. Because Jake could not know that she had found the tape. Emily quickly hid it again, deep inside an old suitcase under the bed. When Jake returned an hour later, she smiled at him and helped him carry the bags. But deep inside, her fear was growing. The peaceful lake house no longer felt peaceful. It felt like a trap. And now, she didn't know how much time she had left. Emily spent the rest of that evening pretending. Pretending everything was normal. Pretending to be happy about the house. Pretending to enjoy dinner with Jake. She laughed at his jokes, helped him unpack supplies, and smiled at him whenever he looked at her. But inside, her mind was working quickly. The voice of her parents was still in her ears. Her father's warning. Her mother's fear. Their words had changed everything. Emily now saw Jake not just as her husband, but as someone she didn't really know. After dinner, Jake went outside to fix a broken light near the porch. Emily stayed in the kitchen. She opened the drawer and took out her phone. She searched for the missing girl her parents had mentioned in the tape. She typed in "College Town girl missing 8 years ago." She added the name of Jake's college. A few articles came up. One name appeared in all of them: Rachel Turner. Rachel had disappeared during her last semester at university. Her friends said she had gone to meet someone the night she disappeared. No body was ever found. No one was arrested. The case had gone cold. Emily read more. One article had a picture of Rachel with her roommate. Another had a small note that said Rachel had dated a few boys, but none were serious relationships. Emily felt a chill as she continued. There was no proof Jake was connected, but her parents believed he was. She remembered something. A box in the attic. She had seen it the first night they arrived, but didn't open it. It was labeled "Old Photos." Later that night, when Jake went to shower, she quietly climbed up to the attic and found the box. She opened it slowly. Inside were dozens of photographs. Family vacations. Her birthdays. Pictures of her parents smiling by the lake. And then she saw one that didn't belong. A photo of Jake. But not with her. He looked younger. His face was clean-shaven. He was standing near a car, and next to him was a girl. Emily looked closely. It was Rachel Turner. She stared at the picture. Jake had known Rachel, maybe even dated her. Why had he never mentioned this? Emily placed the photo into her pocket and closed the box. She climbed back down, heart pounding. When Jake came out of the bathroom, he looked calm, relaxed. "You coming to bed?" he asked. Emily nodded. She smiled again. She felt like she was wearing a mask now, a mask to protect herself. That night, she didn't sleep. She watched Jake as he slept next to her. She thought about how much trust she had given him, how she had believed every word, every story, every little moment between them. And now, she didn't know what was real. The next morning, she woke early and made coffee. She needed time to think. She needed a plan. She didn't want to confront Jake. Not yet. She wasn't ready. She didn't feel safe. She remembered the guestbook again. She took it from the shelf and flipped through the pages. The Happy Millers had written in it every year. Sweet, happy messages. Always on the same date, their wedding anniversary. But Emily's parents had died before they could leave an entry for the last year. Or so she thought. She turned to the final page. And there it was, a note in her father's handwriting. "We'll finally meet you next year." Emily read the line again and again. What did it mean? Meet who? Was it meant for Jake? For her? Then she looked at the date. The same date as their anniversary. But it was written after her parents had already died. The ink was fresh. The paper was clean. She stared at the handwriting. It looked exactly like her father's. Was it really written by him? Or was someone pretending? She looked at Jake. He was sitting outside, drinking his coffee, watching the lake. Suddenly, Emily had a terrible thought. What if Jake had written it? What if he forged the message to scare her? Or to make her believe something? Or worse, what if her parents had written it before they died, knowing the truth about Jake? The fear in Emily's chest grew deeper. She had to get out. She had to find someone to talk to. Someone who could tell her if Jake had a past. Someone who could check records, connect the dots, find the truth. But she couldn't leave quickly. Jake would notice. He would ask questions. And she couldn't risk that. So she decided to play the long game. Be quiet. Act normal. And watch everything. Because now, the man she had married was a mystery. And she was trapped in a house full of secrets, with a guest book that spoke from beyond the grave. The next morning was quiet. The fog outside the lake house was thick. Emily could barely see the trees beyond the edge of the water. The whole place looked like it was wrapped in clouds. It felt like the house was hidden from the world, and maybe that's how Jake liked it. Emily acted normal. She made breakfast, laughed at Jake's small jokes, and helped him organize tools in the garage. But every minute, her mind was working. She kept thinking about Rachel Turner, the old photo, and her father's handwriting in the guest book. While Jake was busy fixing a loose step on the porch, Emily took the chance to make a phone call. She went upstairs, closed the bathroom door, and called a friend from college who now worked as a private investigator. His name was Kevin. Emily hadn't talked to him in years, but she trusted him. She told him part of the story, that she found an old photo of her husband with a girl who had gone missing, that something felt wrong, and that she needed help checking into her husband's past. She didn't say Jake's name yet. Kevin agreed to look into it and said he would call her back in a day or two. Later that day, the fog outside grew even thicker. By afternoon, they could barely see past the deck. Jake said it looked beautiful, like a dream, but to Emily, it felt more like a warning, like something was hiding in the fog, waiting to show itself. That evening, around 5 p.m., there was a knock at the door. This was strange. The lake house was far from the town. No one ever came without calling first. There was no cell signal near the lake, and very few people even knew they were there. Jake opened the door. A woman stood outside. She wore a long dark coat. Her face looked tired, but kind. She introduced herself as Karen. "I used to live around here," she said. "I heard the place was sold. I just wanted to say hello. This house has a lot of memories." Jake smiled and welcomed her in. He offered her a seat and some tea. Emily watched from the kitchen, curious and cautious. Karen sat quietly, looking around the house. Then she turned to Emily and said, "You remind me of someone. Did your parents used to own this house?" Emily nodded. "Yes. My mom and dad bought it about 10 years ago. They passed away 2 years ago." Karen looked down. "I'm sorry. I remember them. Good people. They kept the place in good shape. I used to walk by with my dog." Emily felt something strange in Karen's eyes. It was like she wanted to say more but was afraid to speak in front of Jake. Karen sipped her tea and looked at the guest book on the side table. She stood up and walked over to it. She flipped through the pages, slowly. Then she pointed to one of the entries. "This is your father's handwriting, right?" Emily nodded. Karen stared at the note that said, "We'll finally meet you next year." She looked back at Emily, her eyes now sharper, more serious. "You know, I once found this place open late at night," Karen said. "Your parents weren't here. The lights were on. The door was unlocked. I didn't go in, but something didn't feel right." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Jake smiled politely. "Strange. Must have been a mistake. Maybe the wind blew the door open." Karen didn't respond to Jake. She just stared at Emily again. "I should go," she said. "Just wanted to stop by." As she stepped outside, Emily followed her to the porch. Quietly, Karen whispered to Emily, "Be careful. This house hides more than you think." Then she left. Emily stood frozen, watching Karen walk into the fog until she disappeared. Her mind raced with questions. Who was Karen, really? How much did she know? When Emily went back inside, Jake asked, "What did she say to you?" Emily shook her head. "Just talking about the house." But Jake stared at her a little too long. His eyes searched her face, as if he knew she wasn't telling the whole truth. That night, Emily barely spoke. She went to bed early and waited until Jake fell asleep. Then she pulled the photo of Rachel Turner from under her pillow and stared at it again. Why had Jake hidden this photo? Why had he never mentioned this girl? Why did her father write a message in the guest book after his death? And now, why did Karen come, only to warn her? Emily was beginning to feel like she had stepped into a puzzle with no edges, just pieces scattered everywhere. She didn't know what the final picture would look like, but she was certain of one thing now. Something was deeply wrong in this house, and someone or something wanted her to know. The next morning, Emily woke up early. Jake was still asleep beside her. She quietly got out of bed, careful not to make a sound, and tiptoed down the stairs. The fog had lifted a little, and daylight began to enter the house through the large windows. Everything looked peaceful. But Emily no longer trusted that peace. She decided to explore the house more carefully. Her parents had owned it for 10 years, but she had only visited a few times before they died. Most of the time, she was away for work or living in the city. There were still rooms in the house she barely remembered. She wanted to know if anything was being hidden. There was one small room at the end of the hallway on the second floor. She remembered her dad always kept it locked. When she asked him why, he simply said it was for storage. But now she wanted to see what was really inside. The door was locked, just like before. Emily went to the kitchen and looked through drawers until she found the old bunch of keys her father used to keep. She tried each one by one, until finally, a key turned and the lock clicked open. The room was small and dusty. Boxes were stacked against the walls. A few old bookshelves stood in the corner, and a desk sat under a covered window. Emily stepped inside. The air was thick and still, like no one had opened this room for years. She opened the boxes one by one. Most of them were filled with old papers, photographs, and books. Some papers belonged to her father, notes about property tax, receipts, even journal pages. One journal caught her attention. It was her father's handwriting again. The first few pages talked about small things, whether plans for the house, a list of items to fix. But about halfway through the book, the writing changed. The tone became serious, even worried. One entry said, "I saw him again." Jake was standing near the shed, looking at the woods. "He doesn't know I saw him. He was burying something." Another entry, "I asked Emily if she's sure about Jake. She says she loves him. I want to believe he's a good man, but there's something about him I can't trust." And then the last entry, "If anything happens to me or Margaret, check the shed. There's something there he didn't want us to find." Emily closed the journal, her hands shaking. Her father had written about Jake. He was suspicious of him. He saw Jake burying something. And now, both her parents were dead. She put the journal in her pocket and closed the box. Just then, she heard a sound, a soft whisper. At first, she thought it was the wind, but the window in the room was shut tight. The whisper came again, a little louder this time. It sounded like her name. Emily. She turned quickly. No one was there. The hallway was empty. The house was still. Then she heard it again. This time, it came from downstairs. She slowly walked down, listening. Every step on the wooden stairs creaked. The sound of the whisper didn't return, but something else happened. The guest book on the table was open. She was sure it had been closed the night before. Now a pen was lying next to it, as if someone had just used it. She walked over and looked at the open page. Another message had been written. This one said, "The truth is near. Check the shed before it's too late." Emily stepped back. Her heart was beating fast. She was now sure of one thing. She was not alone in this house. Something or someone was trying to help her. Someone who had once lived here. Someone who had written in that guest book before. She had a choice now. Keep pretending everything was okay, or go to the shed and find out what her father had discovered. She knew what she had to do. She had to go to the shed. But she had to do it when Jake wasn't watching. She had to wait for the right moment. Until then, she would keep acting normal, even though everything inside her was falling apart. Later that evening, Emily cooked dinner as if everything was normal. Jake came into the kitchen, kissed her on the cheek, and asked her about her day. She smiled, acted calm, and told him she had been organizing old boxes. He nodded and didn't seem suspicious. But inside, she was alert, watching every move Jake made, listening to his voice, wondering if this man she married was truly the person he pretended to be. After dinner, Jake said he needed to drive into town to get some more supplies for the renovation. It was the perfect chance. As soon as he left the house, Emily ran to the back door, grabbed a flashlight, and walked straight toward the shed. The shed sat at the far corner of the backyard, near the trees. It was small, made of wood, and slightly leaning to one side. Her father used to keep old tools inside. But now it might be holding a secret, one that could explain what really happened to her parents. The door to the shed was locked with a rusty chain. Emily found an old hammer near the back of the house and broke the chain after a few hard hits. She opened the door and stepped inside. The shed smelled of old wood and damp earth. It was dark, but her flashlight showed everything clearly. Dust covered the shelves. Tools hung on the walls. But nothing looked strange. Until she saw the floor. There was a large rectangle cut into the wooden floorboards. A trapdoor. Emily knelt down and lifted it. Beneath was a shallow hole covered in old cloth. She pulled it back. Inside the hole were two things. The first was a small wooden box. The second was a plastic bag filled with photographs. She opened the box first. It held a voice recorder, a very old one. She pressed the button. It clicked, and a voice came through. It was her father. The message was broken and low, but she could understand the words. If you are hearing this, Emily, it means we didn't make it. We were close to the truth. Jake is not who he says he is. We found something in his past. Something he didn't want you to know. There was a short pause in the recording. Then her father spoke again. He's dangerous. We believe he had something to do with his ex-girlfriend's death. He lied to you. Lied to all of us. He found out we were looking into him. And now, we're scared. If anything happens, know this, we loved you more than anything. Stay safe, my sweet girl. The message ended. Emily sat there, frozen. Her father had recorded this before he died. He was warning her. Jake had a secret past. Maybe he had killed before. Maybe he had killed again. She opened the bag of photos. Inside were printed pictures. All of them showed Jake, but not with her. In some, he was with another woman. In one, he was in front of a courthouse. In another, he was arguing with a man who looked like a police officer. One photo had writing on the back. Melissa Grant died 2016. Case closed. Suspicious boyfriend. Emily didn't know who Melissa Grant was, but she now understood what her parents had discovered. Jake had a history, a dark one. She packed the recorder and the photos back into the bag. She closed the trapdoor and locked the shed again as best as she could. As she walked back toward the house, her hands were shaking. Jake could return any minute. She had to act normal, but she couldn't stay quiet much longer. The truth was too big now, too dangerous to ignore. Emily needed a plan. She had to find out everything about Melissa Grant. She had to know what happened in Jake's past. And most of all, she needed to find a way to get out safely, without Jake knowing she had discovered the truth, because now she was sure. Her husband had killed her parents, and if he found out what she knew, she might be next. Emily didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, listening to every sound, every creak of the wooden walls, every soft breeze brushing the windows. Jake had come home around 10 p.m., carrying grocery bags and smiling like everything was fine. He talked about new paint colors for the bedroom. He even joked about buying a canoe to enjoy the lake. But Emily didn't laugh. She smiled quietly and nodded, all while thinking about the voice message from her father and the photos in the shed. When Jake finally fell asleep, Emily got up silently. She tiptoed to the bathroom, locked the door, and opened her phone. She searched for Melissa Grant. It didn't take long to find news articles. One article said Melissa was found dead in her apartment in 2016. The police called it an accident. But her friends believed otherwise. The article didn't mention Jake, but Emily found a photo attached. It was the same woman from the pictures in the shed. Then she searched court records. It was harder to find, but she kept digging. After an hour, she found a document, a restraining order. Melissa Grant had filed it against a man named Jacob Miller. That was Jake's full name. It was true. Melissa had been afraid of him. And just months after she filed that order, she died. Emily's heart sank. Jake had been hiding this part of his life. Her parents had found out. And now they were gone. It all fit together. But one question still bothered her. Why had her parents kept visiting this lake house year after year? And why did they write in the guest book every anniversary? She took out the guest book again. She looked at the old pages more closely. The Happy Millers had signed it every year on the same date, their wedding anniversary. But one entry stood out. It was different. The handwriting looked rushed, and it was written in the corner of the page, not the usual neat middle. That entry said, "We know the truth. Emily will too." Emily realized it wasn't just a sweet message. It was a clue. Her parents had left it there hoping she would find it, hoping it would guide her when they were gone. She turned to the last page, where the message said, "We'll finally meet you next year." She compared the handwriting to old birthday cards from her dad. It was the same, exactly the same. But her dad was dead. So how was this message written recently? Then something hit her. What if the message wasn't written this year? What if Jake had placed it there? What if he was trying to scare her or cover up the truth? Or worse, what if someone else was still watching her? Emily decided she needed help. She couldn't do this alone anymore. She couldn't keep pretending. The next morning, she told Jake she was feeling tired and wanted to rest. As soon as he left the house to go to the hardware store, Emily called the only person she trusted, her old college friend, Daniel. Daniel was a journalist, smart, careful, and someone who had always believed in asking questions. When Daniel answered, she whispered everything. She told him about the shed, the voice recording, the pictures, Melissa Grant, and the court documents. Daniel didn't hesitate. He said, "Send me copies of everything. I'll start digging right now." Don't let him know you found this. Emily used her phone to take pictures of the photos and the recording box. She sent everything. She also told Daniel where the shed was and where the items were hidden in case anything happened to her. Daniel promised he'd help. He said he knew someone who had once looked into the Melissa Grant case and might have more information. Emily felt a little relief. At least now she wasn't alone. But the danger wasn't over. Jake returned in the afternoon. He walked in with a wide smile, kissed her head, and said, "You look better today. Maybe this place is healing you after all." Emily smiled weakly and said, "Yes, maybe it is." But inside, she was scared, because now she had proof. Now she had shared it. and Jake had no idea. But if he found out what she was doing, what she knew, everything could fall apart. Emily needed to stay one step ahead. She had to find the full truth before Jake discovered her plan. And she had to survive long enough to expose him. Emily waited. She waited for Daniel to call back. Every hour felt heavy. Her hands trembled even when she tried to act normal in front of Jake. She didn't go near the shed again. She didn't ask questions or show signs that she knew anything. She cooked dinner, smiled politely, and nodded as Jake spoke about painting the fence or planting flowers. But inside, her mind was racing. 2 days later, Daniel called. He had news. "Emily," he said, "I talked to Melissa's sister. She said Melissa had told her about a man she dated who became obsessive. She never told the police his real name, but the description matches Jake perfectly. And get this, the week Melissa died, someone was seen near her apartment, but they never identified the person. The police ruled it an accident, but Melissa's sister never believed that. She always suspected foul play." Emily listened quietly. Daniel continued, "That's not all. Your parents didn't just buy the lake house to relax. They bought it because they found out Jake had a past. They didn't trust him. After you got engaged, your dad hired a private investigator. That PI discovered Jake's connection to Melissa. Your parents came to this house every year to go through the case files and to find proof. That's what those photos and recordings were." Emily felt cold all over. Her parents hadn't been controlling. They had been trying to protect her. And now they were gone. She was with the man who had taken their lives. But why did he kill them? Emily whispered. Daniel paused, then said, "Your father was planning to tell you the truth. He told the PI that if something happened to him, Emily should get the evidence. But Jake found out before that could happen. Your parents died in a car crash, right?" "Yes," Emily said. "The brakes failed." Daniel answered slowly, "I found the police report. The mechanic who checked the car after the crash wrote that the brake line had been tampered with, but it was never followed up." Emily closed her eyes. It all made sense now. Jake had killed Melissa. Then, when her parents got too close, he made it look like an accident. After that, he married Emily and brought her to the same lake house, the place where it all started. Emily's stomach turned. She needed to get out. She told Daniel she would pack a bag and leave quietly when Jake went to town again. Daniel promised to alert the local police and meet her there with the PI. But Jake had already noticed something was wrong. That night, as they sat by the fireplace, Jake turned to Emily and said, "You've been quiet lately. Is something bothering you?" Emily forced a smile and said, "Just tired." Jake studied her face. His smile faded a little. The next morning, Emily woke up to find her phone missing. Her backpack had been moved. The shed was locked with a new padlock. Jake stood in the kitchen, cooking breakfast. He turned and said, I threw out some old junk in the shed. It was a mess. Emily's heart pounded. She acted calm. She ate. She waited. When Jake went outside to the dock, Emily went to the guest room and used the landline phone to call Daniel's second number. She whispered that Jake was acting strange. Daniel told her to leave now. The police were already nearby. Emily took the keys, walked to the car, and started it. She didn't even pack. She just drove. Jake saw her leaving. He ran after the car, shouting. But Emily didn't stop. 2 minutes later, she reached the main road, where Daniel and 2 police officers were waiting. She jumped out and ran into their arms. The police arrested Jake the same day. In the shed, they found old belongings of Melissa, notes from Emily's father, even the original voice recorder. Everything was there. Enough to reopen Melissa's case and to investigate the deaths of Emily's parents. It was over. Jake was gone. Weeks later, Emily returned to the lake house. Not to live, but to say goodbye. She opened the guest book one last time. She looked at all the notes signed by her parents, the happy Millers. They had loved her deeply. They had tried to protect her until the end. Emily added one last line beneath the final entry. I finally understand. Thank you, Mom and Dad. She closed the book gently. Then she walked out of the house and into the light, free at last from the secrets that haunted her. Thank you for listening to The Wrong Anniversary Flowers by Amjad. I hope you enjoyed the story and learned something new today. If you'd like to read the full story again or share it with others, you can download the PDF version of this audiobook for free. Just click the link in the description below and get your copy now. Keep learning and stay tuned for more stories to improve your English. Happy reading!